Hello, I'm Dr. Mikey Mewborn, and this is Church Ministry. Today we're looking at the topic, planning for the future. This is a wonderful topic for us to look at because it is vital to an organization. It's vital to people's lives in general, but it's vital to an organization that we're part of. So maybe it's a church organization or a nonprofit organization. But how do we plan for the future? How do we set that up? How do we strategize? And so we're going to look at those types of things in today's lesson. It's so good to be with you. Let's begin our study. Hello and welcome to Church Ministry. Today we're looking at the topic, planning for the future. Our outline notes are by Kenneth Gangle in his book, Team Leadership. So good to be with you today. Let's begin our study. When we're thinking about the idea of planning for the future, there are several principles that we can look at in this planning stage. And so when we think about how we want to accomplish things, there has to be some kind of action steps that will be taken. You remember I've said in a previous lesson, if you fail to plan, you're planning to fail. And that's important because planning matters in any type of organization or ministry or something like that. Now, as we look forward, I want to begin with some bullet points. And planning invests time, it does not spend it. In other words, when somebody plans for something, that's an investment, and you're investing time into that. But you're not necessarily spending it or wasting it per se or doing things with it. So you're pouring into something that is very vital for the continuation of a company or the growth of a company. So that really matters when you're looking at it. Also, planning requires careful attention to immediate choices. Now, in the idea of planning for something, you have to hone in on certain areas when there are choices that come up. And so as things pop up throughout the planning stages and choices need to be made, they need to be made in that moment. So there has to be careful attention put to things that are in the moment. And that means they're relevant. That means they're things that you're dealing with in that time. Planning is cyclical based on evaluation. In other words, when you are planning, you have to also evaluate that. And as you evaluate it or you go through some of the plans, you might have to evaluate and then you come back through them and see if you're on the right track. So there's a lot of strategy involved in planning. When I think of strategy, I definitely think of the game of chess. There's a lot of strategy. Maybe you've played the game of chess before, or maybe you haven't. But the idea is to put the opponent's king into checkmate, put them into a position where they can't move. And any position they move, they'll die, or they're already in a position at that point where the king will not make it anyway. So we're talking about checkmate. But in order to get to that point, there has to be a strategy. The great chess players think several moves ahead so that they can make sure that all their pieces are going a certain direction or going certain ways to attack the king or attack other pieces. And so that's very important in the game of chess, but it's also very important when we're thinking about planning for things as well. Now, as we continue on, planning requires acting objectively toward goal realization. When we think about plans and what that requires, there's an idea of objectivity, knowing exactly what needs to take place, having objectives. You think of the military, they're known for having objectives, and everybody on a team knows that objective, and they are all working together to accomplish that objective. And so that's important. And so that'll help toward the goal realization. Planning should allow for maximum participation. In other words, if you're getting together a group and you're going to start setting and achieving goals or planning for the future, what you're going to do is try to include the people that are on that specific team and have maximum participation from everybody on that team. That way, you have insight from a lot of different personalities, a lot of different perspectives, people that come up differently and they have a different background. And that's really good when you're looking at creating plans and things like that. Planning increases in specificity as the event draws near. So as the event is coming in or coming closer, there is going to be a huge increase in the specifics or the particulars, the things that have to be dealt with, and you've got to lay it out. It's almost as if you have to give a dry run of the event before it can fully take place, and maybe have people practice what they're going to do, or having a run through. That's helpful when you're looking at creating an event or looking at executing something. Also, when we look at planning for the future, we look at basic planning models, mission, vision, values, things like this. Planning step model. A long-range plan develops out of a mission statement, and that's vital when you think of how plans really are going to play out. It's going to come out of the mission statement, and so the mission statement is given or created to show why an organization exists. So if it's a church, then a church should have a mission statement or a purpose statement or whatever you want to call it. But also any kind of organization, any kind of nonprofit should have a mission statement to let people know why they are functioning and what they actually do. So there's some questions that need to be answered in that. Why do we exist? Information sources, goals and objectives, implementation, results, review, and evaluation. You need to be able to, within the planning step model, is to walk through the mission statement all the way into the results, review, and evaluation phase. Because if you're not able to do this, this plan step model will just fall apart. And so you need to go from the point of why do we exist all the way to how do we evaluate this, and that'll help you in planning for the future. Also, the progressive 3-year model is another model that's within this basic planning model. Ken Callahan says, the process of approach is more developmental and dynamic and has a more flexible spirit. It helps keep options open, and it's a progressive approach that is very developmental as you go. So as you're working through it, you create ways of doing that. And Ken Callahan has some books on these types of things, and he helps people in planning out the ways of being effective. And so this book that he has written here is 12 Keys to an Effective Church. It's a planning workbook. How do you lay that out? What does it look like? What is our 3-year strategy, or what is our 3-year plan of getting better and stronger? And that's progressive. It has a way of developing and being strengthened by the progress that's being given as well. So those are very important. And then annual planning model. We see this within ministry a lot of times, and in that you have to look at first the ministry, and then you're going to look at name the objective, and then you're going to start setting goals within that group. And then you're going to number those goals according to that priority. So for instance, let's take a children's ministry. A children's ministry is wanting to reach out to all the families that are in a certain community. And so that's going to be their objective. We are going to do a backyard Bible club in this area, and we're going to try to knock on every door. We're going to try to reach every child that's in this area. And so what you're going to do is you're going to set up the objective, and then you're going to set goals. How do we do that? How do we knock on every door? What are we going to hand out to them? Who's going to go knocking on doors? What's that going to look like? And then what are we inviting them to? And so there's a lot of goals that will be set up because there's this big objective, right? And so then you're going to number those things by priority. So what's the most important thing? Well, the most important thing is that you have something for them to come to. And so you're going to have to beef that up. But the second most important thing is to find if there's anybody in that neighborhood that already has a connection with the church, and maybe you can utilize them. But then next priority possibly would be, how can we get people together to go knocking on doors? Because that's how you're going to get just more people going out to the public with cold calls, those types of things. So you're going to start numbering those things. And then you're going to create action steps. So we've got our ministry, we've got our objective, we have our goals that we're looking at. We want to reach this number of people and we want to do it this way. And then you're going to say the action steps are A, B, C, and you're going to line those up. And this is kind of this idea, we will by this time do this, or we will take care of this project, or we're going to take care of this. And so that's part of this planning stage. When you're looking at an annual planning model, you're saying, okay, we know our ministry that we're working with. We know the objective. We know the goals we're setting. We want to grow our children's ministry by this amount. And with that, we're setting goals how to do that. Also, those action steps are going to be more the detailed looks of how to accomplish those very things. And so that's what you see there. All right. And then as we continue on, you see the idea of organizing your planning group. And so you need to organize your planning group that's going to work within an organization. So let's say it's a planning group for the children's ministry of a church or for the youth ministry or whoever. So in order to put together that team, that planning team, you're going to have to do things carefully. And you're going to have to choose wisely who these people are. People who know your organization. So, number one, they've got to know who you are. They've got to know your heart, know kind of the direction that you're wanting to go. Number two, they need to be spiritually mature. They need to be people who are at a place in their lives spiritually that they can handle possible criticism, but they can also take things and run with them as well. People that are flexible and mature. And so it's important for people to be able to understand where others are coming from. And maybe their agendas are not as important as somebody else's, and they need to be flexible in that. There might come a time when they will step in and take over and assume responsibility, but maybe they need to be flexible and not be so dogmatic in what they think should happen, but be understanding about other things. They also need to be committed and passionate. One of the worst things for any type of ministry in the church or nonprofit is when people jump into something and then they quickly pull away, or they stop showing up for meetings, or they stop showing up or doing their action items. And because of that, it's showing the lack of commitment, and they're not passionate about what's going on as well. And then I would say they need to be positive and optimistic. So, in other words, if they come in negative with things, or they're acting in a negative manner, it's going to bring the whole group down. But if they're positive and they're optimistic, it'll strengthen the whole group, and it'll bring a lot of life to the planning stage, all those types of things. When we think about teams and everything that goes into that, you think about principles and goals, results, success, actions, commitment, reliability. You need all these things when you're looking at teammates or team players. Because if somebody drops the ball in an area, it's going to be difficult. Everybody's going to have to scramble and pick up the pieces, or pick up the work that is just kind of left out there and nobody's taking care of it. So it's important that people that are on a team are reliable, they can count on one another, they're committed, and those types of things, because that really does matter. Now, planning and the budget was a section in this chapter that I thought was very important. Budget should generate from the bottom up as much as possible. And a couple of points here that I thought that was neat, just dealing with church life. Sunday school classes should be equipped for ministry. So if people or ministries are not equipped with everything that they need financially to do what they're supposed to do, then they can't be successful. So you need to help them in every way be successful. Finance committees should make all major decisions dealing with finances. That's important. They should have that right. If there's a loss of money, or not enough money coming in, they should be able to make decisions saying, hey, we need to cut spending here or there. We need to cut our budgets back, whatever it might be. And they need to be empowered with those types of ways. That's what our author says. Then there should be controlled buying, and that's vital for financial success. If you have people going rogue and they just spend money and then they turn in a receipt or whatever might happen, that is just not wise. And there should be some policies in place to keep people from doing those very things, because in smaller churches or smaller organizations, sometimes people just go and spend money, and it creates a tremendous struggle and puts the church in trouble a lot of times when that money's not actually there, and then it becomes an issue between with relationships between the people that are spending and the people that are trying to protect that, and so that becomes a fellowship issue. And then clarify designated giving. In other words, when money it comes in and it's set for a specific task, or somebody gives money and they say, I want this to go toward, well, there needs to be a strong policy in place for that. Does the church accept designated funds? If it does, if it doesn't, then you don't have to worry about it. It just goes into the general fund. And so that's not a big issue. And a lot of churches are more, they're bent that way because they don't like the designated fund because, or designated monies coming in, because then that means that person has power over those areas. And that's not a great model. But in some churches, there is a designated fund for specific things. And with those designated funds or designated giving, you have to be very careful. Whenever that comes in, it has to go directly to those things, or it's a big issue. So that has to be dealt with in with good stewardship. And I just kind of want to put here Malachi 3:8. Will a man rob God? Yet you have robbed me. But you say, wherein have we robbed you? In tithes and offerings. When we're dealing with the subject of money, it becomes very personal. And people really want to be careful where they give because they want their money to go to the right things. But at the same time, there is a requirement on people's lives with tithes and offerings. And so it's important. So when you think of the leadership of the church trying to set up budgets and trying to set things correctly and set them up so everybody succeeds, it has to be done in such a way that people know where their money is going. And that's very important when you're thinking about the financial success of an organization or a church, making sure everything is transparent and clear as you move forward. All right. Well, this has been Planning for the Future. It's been great to be with you today. God bless you, and talk to you soon. Bye-bye. All right. That concludes our study about planning for the future. I hope you've enjoyed this lesson. There's a few things, of course, I want you to pay attention to, and kind of how do you plan? What does that look like? What does the mission look like? And what is a timeline that you have as you're working through setting some of those goals that you have? So it's been so good to be with you today. Hope you have a great rest of the day. God bless you. Bye-bye.